The night my father threw me out, the hurricane already had a name. People on the news kept saying it like naming a storm made it less dangerous. Like calling it Hurricane Iris could make the windows stop shaking or the sky stop sounding angry. I was 15 years old, standing in our front hallway with rain hammering the roof. Holding a backpack my father had just thrown at my feet. My little sister Emily stood behind him in her pink sweatshirt, crying into her hands. But not because she was sorry. She was crying because her lie had worked too well. "Dad," I said. "I didn't do it. My father, Frank Whitaker," looked at me like I was something rotten he had finally decided to throw away. "Enough. Nora. Emily is lying. My mother, Linda," stood near the kitchen doorway with one hand pressed to her mouth. She had heard everything. She had heard Emily say, "I stole money from Dad's emergency cash drawer." She had heard Emily say I had been acting wrong for weeks. She had heard Emily whisper that I scared her, that something was sick in me, that maybe I needed help before I hurt someone. None of it was true. Emily had taken the money to replace the phone she had broken and hidden from our parents. When she realized Dad would find out during the hurricane preparations, she pointed at me because I was the easier daughter to blame. I was quiet. I read too much. I argued when rules made no sense. Emily was sweet. Emily was small. Emily knew how to cry before anyone asked the second question. My father believed her before I finished my first sentence. "I don't need a sick daughter in this house," he said. The words hit harder than the wind outside. "Frank," my mother whispered. For 1 second, I thought she would stop him. For 1 second, I thought a mother could not watch her child be pushed into a storm. Then Dad opened the front door. Rain blew into the hallway. Cold and sharp. "Get out." I stared at him. "There's a hurricane." "Then maybe you should have thought of that before you brought this poison into my home." His home. Not Or's. Not mine. Emily sobbed louder behind him. My mother did not move. I looked at her, begging without words because I still had pride at 15. Even when it was breaking, she looked back at me with wet eyes and stayed exactly where she was. That was the moment I understood something no child should understand. Sometimes the person who loves you quietly can still fail you loudly. Dad shoved the backpack toward me with his foot. "Go." I picked it up with shaking hands. Inside were 2 shirts, my school notebook, and a hoodie. No phone charger. No money. No dry socks. Behind me, the living room lights flickered. Outside, the street was already flooding at the curb. I stepped onto the porch. The wind pushed rain into my face so hard I could barely breathe. "Mom," I said one last time. She took 1 step forward. Dad turned his head. "Linda." Just her name. A warning. She stopped. Then he shut the door. I heard the lock turn. That sound became the rest of my childhood ending. I stood under the porch light for maybe 30 seconds, soaked already, waiting for the door to open again. It did not. Through the window, I saw my mother's shape behind the curtain. She was watching. She could see me. She did not turn the lock. So I walked. I walked because standing there felt like begging a house to remember me. The streetlights shook in the wind. Branches scraped the road. Rainwater ran over my shoes. I had no plan except to reach the bus station. Even though I did not know if buses ran during hurricanes, I kept hearing my father's voice, "I don't need a sick daughter." After 6 blocks, a car came too fast around the corner. Its headlights blurred through the rain. I stepped back, slipped, and then the world became white noise, tears, and a hard impact that stole the air from my lungs. I do not remember falling. I remember the taste of rain. I remember someone shouting, "Oh my God, she's a kid." I remember a woman's voice close to my ear, calm and firm, saying, "Stay with me. Sweetheart, help is coming." Her name was Grace Vale. She was an off-duty nurse driving home from the hospital when she found me on the side of the road. "Laughter," she would tell me. I kept trying to say, "My mom saw me. Not my leg hurts. Not where am I, just that. My mom saw me." I woke up in a hospital with fluorescent lights above me and Grace sitting in a chair beside my bed. My left arm was in a sling. My ribs ached when I breathed. There were bruises, stitches, questions, forms, and a social worker with kind eyes who asked where my parents were. I gave them the number. They called. No one came. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not the day after. On the third day, Grace returned with a clean sweatshirt and a paper bag of warm muffins. She sat beside me and said, "Nora, honey." Sometimes survival starts with accepting who did not show up. I looked at the door again. Still expecting my mother. Still expecting my father to burst in angry but relieved. Still expecting Emily to confess. No one came. So when the social worker asked if I had somewhere safe to go, I looked at Grace. Grace looked back at me, and for the first time, since the front door locked behind me, someone did not look away. For the first 3 days after the accident, I learned that a hospital can be both loud and lonely. Machines beeped. Nurses walked quickly past my door. Rain tapped against the windows until the hurricane moved inland and became something weaker on the news. People kept asking me questions in careful voices. Did my father hit me? Did I run away often? Did I feel safe at home? I wanted to answer like the kind of girl adults believed. Clear. Calm. Useful. But every question led back to the same locked door. The same curtain. The same shape of my mother watching me through glass. Grace Vale visited after every shift. Even when she looked tired enough to fall asleep, standing, she brought sweatpants, a toothbrush, a phone charger, and a blue notebook because she noticed I kept asking for paper. Writers survive differently. She told me. They make the pain sit still long enough to name it. I wrote everything. Emily's lie. Dad's words. Mom's hand over her mouth. The lock. The rain. The headlights. Grace's voice. On the fourth day, a social worker named Mrs. Palmer came into my room with a folder held tight against her chest. That was when I knew my parents had finally answered. She sat beside my bed and said, "Nora, your father says you left voluntarily after a family argument." I looked at her. He threw my backpack outside. He also says your behavior had become unstable. There it was. Sick. The word had changed clothes. But it was still the same accusation. Did he say he was coming? Mrs. Palmer's face softened in a way that answered before she did. Not today. I turned my head toward the window. Outside. The sky was pale and clean. Almost insulting. And my mother, Mrs. Palmer, was quiet. She confirmed his statement. Something inside me went still. Not healed. Not broken. Still. My mother had watched him lock the door. And then she had helped him lock the story too. Grace came later and found me staring at the wall. I told her what Mrs. Palmer said. She sat down slowly. "I'm sorry." She lied. Yes. She saw me outside. Grace did not try to soften it. Yes. That was one of the first gifts she gave me. She did not decorate cruelty until it became easier to swallow. Over the next week, the hospital released me into temporary care while child services investigated. Grace could not simply take me home like a movie ending. There were forms, checks, court dates, emergency placement rules, and adults deciding which safe place counted as safe enough. But Grace kept showing up. She attended meetings. She brought my school records. She found the nurse who had written down what I kept saying in the ambulance. My mom saw me. That note mattered. So did the weather report. So did the hospital timestamp. So did the police record of the accident. My father had built his story on my supposed sickness. Grace helped build mine on paper. 2 weeks later, Emily called the hospital social worker and asked to speak to me. I said no. Then I cried for an hour because saying no to your little sister at 15 feels like cutting off your own hand. Even when that hand pushed you toward the storm. Months passed in foster placement. Then, in a guardianship arrangement, Grace helped supervise. I returned to school with a sling, healing ribs, and a new silence around my name. My parents did not visit. They sent no birthday card. No apology. No explanation. Once. My mother left a voicemail through Mrs. Palmer saying, "We hope Nora gets the help she needs." I listened to it once, then deleted it. I did not need help becoming the lie they had chosen. I needed help surviving the truth. Grace became that help. She did not replace my mother. Replacement is too simple a word for what happens after abandonment. She became proof that adults could choose you without owning you. She helped me apply for scholarships, taught me how to read medical bills, and sat in the back row when I graduated high school because my family did not come. When I walked across that stage at 18, I looked into the crowd and saw her standing, clapping with both hands above her head like I had won an Olympic medal instead of a diploma. Afterward, she hugged me carefully because my ribs still ached in cold weather. "Where now?" she asked. I looked at the diploma in my hand. "Somewhere they can't lock me out." That became the shape of my life. I studied crisis counseling, then social work, then public health. I took Grace's last name legally when I turned 21. Not because blood had stopped existing, but because I wanted my name to belong to someone who had answered the phone when the storm called. Nora Whitaker became Nora Vale. Later, Dr. Nora Vale. I built the Storm Door Foundation for teenagers abandoned during family crisis, natural disaster, medical emergency, or simply the kind of private cruelty people hide behind respectable curtains. 13 years after Hurricane Iris, I received an invitation to speak at a university graduation on the Gulf Coast. I almost declined until I saw the list of student honorees. Emily Whitaker. My sister's name sat there in clean black letters. Untouched by rain. Untouched by consequence. For a long time, I stared at it. Then I called Grace. She listened while I said nothing. Finally, she asked, "Are you going for them?" I looked at the invitation again. "No." My voice was steady. "I'm going for the girl they left in the storm." For 13 years, I kept the Whitaker name in a locked drawer of my life. It appeared on old school records, hospital forms, child services paperwork, and the first pages of the blue notebook Grace gave me. But in the world I built after the storm, I was Nora Vale. That was the name on my degrees. That was the name on the foundation documents. That was the name printed on conference programs, grant proposals, research articles, and letters from teenagers who had found shelter because someone finally believed them before disaster finished the job. When the university invited me to speak at its spring graduation, the email said they wanted someone who could talk about resilience after crisis. I almost laughed when I read that. Resilience is such a clean word for something that often begins with dirty clothes, hospital lights, and learning which adults will not come. I accepted the invitation 2 days after seeing Emily's name on the honoree list. Grace came to my office that afternoon and found me staring at the graduation program draft. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I know. Seeing them might cost you more than you expect." I touched the printed page where my name appeared, Dr. Nora Valle. Founder, Storm Door Foundation. Keynote speaker. They already took what they could. This is not for them. Grace sat across from me. Her hair was silver now. Her hands thinner. But her eyes were the same eyes that had looked at a 15-year-old girl in a hospital bed and refused to look away. Then what is it for? She asked. I thought of the porch light in the hurricane. My mother behind the curtain. My father's voice cutting through the rain. For every locked door that thought it had the last word. The weeks before graduation passed in a strange quiet. I wrote my speech. Then rewrote it. Then deleted entire pages that sounded too angry or too forgiving. I did not want to stand on that stage and beg the past to understand me. I did not want to turn my pain into a pretty lesson for parents who only loved children when loving them was easy. In the end, I wrote the truth with no names at first. A 15-year-old girl. A hurricane. A lie. A father who chose rage over questions. A mother who watched from behind a window. A sister who stayed silent long enough for silence to become a second lie. Grace read the final draft and said only, "That will leave a mark." "Good," I said. Some marks are overdue. The morning of graduation. The campus smelled like cut grass and warm pavement. Families crowded the sidewalks carrying flowers, balloons, cameras, and pride. I watched them from the speaker entrance, remembering how I had once looked for my parents in every audience. Even after I knew better, Grace stood beside me in a navy suit, holding my folder. "You're shaking," she said. "I'm not afraid. I didn't say you were." Inside the auditorium, thousands of people murmured under bright lights. I looked through the side curtain and saw rows of graduates in black gowns. It took less than a minute to find Emily. She looked older. Of course. 26 now. Not 13. Her hair was pinned neatly beneath her cap. And she kept touching the honor cord at her neck like she needed something to hold on to. Beside the family seating, I saw my mother first. Linda Whitaker had aged into softness, but I recognized the way her hand rested at her throat when she was nervous. My father sat beside her, shoulders stiff. Joe sat, still wearing authority like an old jacket he believed fit. They did not know yet. I could tell. They had come to watch Emily graduate, not to see the daughter they had renamed as Sickness return under a title they could not dismiss. When the dean approached the podium, the screen behind her lit up with the keynote slide. Dr. Nora Valle, founder, Storm Door Foundation. My mother leaned forward. My father did not move. Then the dean began reading my biography. Dr. Valle is a crisis advocate, public health researcher, and founder of the Storm Door Foundation, which supports youth abandoned during family crisis and natural disaster displacement. My mother's hand moved quickly to my father's arm. She gripped him so hard I could see it from the side of the stage. My father turned toward the screen, and for the first time in 13 years, I watched recognition fight its way through his face. Not love, not regret, recognition. The kind people fear when the person they buried walks in carrying a microphone. The dean smiled toward the curtain. Please welcome Dr. Nora Valle. I walked onto the stage. The applause rose around me like weather. Loud and warm, and nothing like the storm that had swallowed me at 15. I stood at the podium and looked out over the auditorium. For one brief second, my eyes met my mother's craps. She covered her mouth. My father went pale. Emily stared as if the stage itself had opened beneath her. I placed my speech on the podium and let the silence stretch after the applause faded. They had made me stand outside once, soaked and voiceless, waiting for a door to open. Now they were the ones trapped in a room where everyone was waiting for me to speak. I leaned toward the microphone and began. 13 years ago, A girl was told she was sick because the truth was too inconvenient for her family to ask for. The auditorium grew still. I did not look away from the crowd. That girl was 15. There was a hurricane outside. Herr Sister Lied. Her father believed the lie faster than he loved his child. Her mother watched from behind a window while the door stayed locked. In the family section, my father lowered his head. Too late. I continued. Some doors do not close because a child is guilty. They close because adults are too proud to ask one more question. The room was silent enough to hear the lights hum. And for the first time in my life, the storm was not louder than me. I continued before anyone in that auditorium could decide whether to breathe. When we talk about crisis, we often talk about wind, floodwater, broken power lines, emergency shelters, and rescue vehicles. But some storms begin inside homes. Some children are not lost because the weather takes them. They are lost because the people responsible for them decide a lie is more comfortable than protection. A sound moved through the crowd. Not quite a gasp. Not quite a whisper. I saw Emily's shoulders start to shake. My mother was still gripping my father's arm. My father stared at the floor as if the polished wood might open and let him disappear beneath it. I did not give him that mercy. The girl I am speaking about was not perfect. I said. No 15-year-old is. She argued. She cried. She had a sharp tongue when she was frightened. But she was not sick. She was not dangerous. She was not the thing her family needed her to be, so they could feel clean after throwing her away. The dean sat behind me. Very still. Faculty members looked out over the audience, realizing this was no ordinary inspirational speech. Good. I had not come to decorate their ceremony with polished pain. I had come to tell the truth in a room large enough that my family could not stuff it back under a curtain. That night, after the door locked, she walked into a hurricane with a backpack and no plan. A car hit her before she reached safety. An off-duty nurse stopped. A stranger did what family would not do. She stayed. I turned slightly toward Grace, who sat in the reserved speaker section. Her eyes shone, but her chin was lifted. That stranger's name was Grace Vale. Applause began before I could continue. Not loud at first. But then it grew, spreading across the room as people understood that the woman who had saved me was sitting among them. Grace pressed one hand to her heart. My mother began to cry. My father still did not look up. Grace did not save me with one grand gesture. I said, when the applause faded. She saved me by showing up again and again. She helped put my story on paper when my family tried to call it instability. She taught me that survival is not just breathing after the worst night of your life. Survival is building a life where the people who abandoned you no longer get to define what happened. I paused and let my eyes move over the graduates. Some of you know what I mean. Some of you are sitting here today with empty chairs in the family section. Some of you are smiling for people who hurt you, because this is a day you earned, and you do not want them to ruin one more thing. Some of you have been told you are too difficult, too dramatic, too damaged, too sick, when the truth is that you were simply inconvenient to someone else's story. Emily covered her face. I saw it. So did the people around her. Let them. The Storm Door Foundation exists because I know what happens when adults close the door during the storm. We provide emergency housing support, legal advocacy, counseling referrals, and education grants for young people abandoned during family crisis and disaster displacement. We do not ask them to prove they were perfect before we help them survive. We ask whether they are safe. That question should have been asked of me. My voice stayed steady, but my hands tightened on the podium. No one in my family asked it. Not my father. Not my mother. Not the sister whose lies started the night and whose silence protected it for 13 years. The room shifted. There it was. Not names. But enough. Emily lifted her head, tears streaking her face. My father finally looked at me. His face had gone gray with public recognition. He could not shout. He could not call me sick. He could not tell the room I was unstable. Not here. Not with my name on the program, my foundation in the brochure, and 2,000 witnesses listening to the daughter he once threw into the rain. Today, I said, we celebrate graduates. We celebrate endurance, discipline, and future. But I want to say this especially to anyone who had to survive a locked door. The people who abandoned you do not get the final vote on your worth. A lie may change where you sleep for a night. It may change your name. It may change the shape of your family. But it does not have to become your identity. I looked down at my prepared notes, then closed the folder. The rest did not need paper. They called me sick because the truth was too heavy for them to carry. But sickness was never the child standing in the storm. Sickness was the pride that chose not to ask. Sickness was the fear that watched through a window. Sickness was the silence that grew older and still called itself innocence. My mother made a small sound. People around her turned. I let the silence hold her there. Then I looked back to the graduates. To the class of today, build lives no locked door can contain. Ask one more question before you believe the easiest accusation. And when someone survives what should have ended them, do not call them broken because their strength makes you uncomfortable. The applause began slowly, then rose like a wave. Students stood first, then faculty, then families. Grace stood with them, crying openly now. I stepped back from the podium and let the applause wash over me. Not as forgiveness, not as revenge alone, but as the sound of a room my father could not control. In the family section, he remained seated. My mother stood halfway and then sat again. Trapped between shame and habit, Emily was sobbing into both hands. For 13 years, they had lived inside the story where I was the sick daughter who disappeared. In less than 20 minutes, that story had become too small to hide them. The storm had finally found the right room. I had barely stepped off the stage when the past tried to follow me through the side door. Nora. My father's voice cracked across the backstage hallway. Older now, but still carrying the same command that had once sent me into the rain. 2 faculty members turned. The event coordinator, a woman named Marisol, paused with her clipboard against her chest. Grace moved closer to me without touching my arm, because she knew I did not need holding. I needed room. I turned slowly. Frank Whitaker was coming down the aisle faster than dignity allowed. With my mother close behind him and Emily trailing them in her graduation gown, face wet, honor cord twisted in one hand. People were watching. Not everyone. But enough for my father to understand that his voice did not own this hallway. Nora, he said again, softer when he saw Marisol step between us. Doctor, Vale is scheduled for faculty reception in 10 minutes. Marisol, please give her space. My father looked offended by the word space, as if space was something only he had the right to grant or take. I'm her father. I smiled then. Not warmly. That title expired the night you locked the door. My mother made a small sound. Please, she whispered. Not here. I looked at her for the first time, up close in 13 years. Her face had folded with age and fear. Her eyes were the same eyes from behind the curtain. Not here, I asked. You did it in a hurricane. I'm only saying it in a building with lights. The hallway went silent. A young faculty assistant standing near the curtain looked down at her program, pretending not to hear while hearing everything. My father's face reddened. You had no right to humiliate us like that. I almost laughed. You threw a 15-year-old into a storm and told the world she was unstable. You do not get to lecture me on humiliation. We thought no. I cut in. You didn't think. You reacted. You punished. Then you lied to the social worker when the hospital called. His mouth opened, then closed. That detail had landed. My mother began crying harder. We were scared. So was I. I said, outside. Emily stepped forward. Nora. Please. I need to say something. I looked at my little sister. Now, a grown woman in a cap and gown. Trembling beneath the weight of a lie she had carried, like stolen jewelry. Not yet. Her face crumpled. Please. You had 13 years to begin. She stopped, as if I had slapped the air between us. Grace's voice came quietly beside me. Nora. Your car is ready when you are. My father looked at Grace then. Recognition, mixing with resentment. You, he said. You took her from us? Grace did not move. No. Mr. Whitaker. I found her after you left her. Someone behind him inhaled sharply. My mother covered her mouth. Emily whispered, Dad. Stop. But my father was still the kind of man who believed volume could rebuild a broken throne. She was my daughter. Was. I said, listen to your own grammar. Marisol shifted closer to me. Doctor. Val. Would you like assistance exiting? My father heard it and stepped back slightly. Finally understanding the reversal. Once. He had used a door and a storm to remove me. Now a building full of witnesses was prepared to remove him from my path. I looked at him. Then at my mother. Then at Emily. Do not follow me into the reception. Do not contact my foundation. Do not use this ceremony to perform regret where people can see you. My mother reached toward me. I stepped back before her hand touched my sleeve. Nora. I looked for you. The lie was so late and so fragile it almost fell apart before I answered. No. You looked through a window. There is a difference. Emily sobbed. I lied. I know I lied. I was scared. You were 13 when you lied. I said, you became guilty every year you stayed silent. Her shoulders shook. She had no defense. That was the first honest thing she had given me. My father's voice dropped. What do you want from us? I looked past him at the auditorium doors, where families were still laughing, taking photos, celebrating futures that had not required walking through a storm alone. Nothing. He blinked, as if nothing was more frightening than anger. Nora, I wanted parents when I was 15. I wanted a mother when I was outside the window. I wanted a father when the hospital called. I wanted a sister before the lie grew up with her. I do not want strangers 13 years late. Marisol opened the side door. Grace stepped through first, then waited. I turned back one final time. You wanted a private apology after giving me a public exile. Privacy is another door you no longer own. Then I walked out, leaving them beneath the bright hallway lights with their faces exposed. Their excuses useless, and their daughter's graduation program still folded in my father's hand with my name printed larger than his pride could erase. The faculty reception was held in a glass-walled room overlooking the campus lawn, where graduates were still taking pictures under trees heavy with spring leaves. I stood near the window with Grace beside me, holding a paper cup of water I had not touched. My speech had ended, but my body had not yet understood that the danger was over. That is the strange thing about surviving people who once controlled your safety. Even after you grow up, even after you earn degrees and build a foundation and stand beneath lights with 2,000 people applauding, part of you still listens for the lock. Grace noticed my hand shaking around the cup. You can leave, she said softly. You do not owe this room anything. I know. Do you? I looked at her and almost smiled. I'm learning. Across the reception room, the dean was speaking with donors near the refreshment table. A few graduates approached me one by one. Not with the easy excitement people usually bring to keynote speakers, but with something quieter. A young man said, "My uncle raised me after my parents kicked me out." I never heard anyone say it like that before. A girl with gold tassels whispered, "Thank you for saying empty chairs don't get to define us." Each time, I thanked them. Each time, I felt the past lose one more inch of its grip. Then Marisol came to me. Face tense but professional. "Dr. Val, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your family is still near the lobby." Grace's eyes sharpened. "Are they causing trouble?" "Not loudly." Marisol said, "But Mr. Atal, Whitaker is asking to speak with you before you leave. He told staff, this is a family matter." I set the water cup down. It stopped being private when he made my abandonment a public lie. Marisol nodded. "Would you like campus security to escort you to your car?" Before I could answer, Emily appeared at the reception entrance. Not inside. Exactly. She stood at the threshold like someone who had finally learned doors matter. Her cap was gone. Her gown hung open. Her face looked emptied by crying. A security staff member stood a few feet behind her. "Dr. Val," Marisol said. She asked permission to stand there. "She has not crossed in." Grace looked at me. "Your choice." That was why Grace had saved my life more than once. She gave me choices after my family had taken them. I walked to the doorway but did not step into the hall. "Say it from there," I told Emily. She swallowed hard. I lied. Several people nearby grew still, pretending not to listen and failing. Emily looked down, then forced herself to look at me. I took Dad's emergency money. I broke my phone. I was scared he'd punish me. And I told him you did it. Then I said you were acting wrong because I knew he already thought you were difficult. Her voice broke. I knew what he would believe. I said nothing. She continued, crying harder now. "When they said you were in the hospital, I wanted to tell the truth. Mom told me not to make things worse. Dad said you needed help and that I should stop blaming myself. So I stopped. For 13 years. I stopped every day. The words sat between us like a body finally uncovered. You did not stop blaming yourself." I said, "You stopped protecting me." Emily nodded, sobbing. "Yes. Do you want forgiveness?" She covered her mouth, then lowered her hand. "Yes. You cannot have it." She flinched. I did not soften it. "Not because I want to punish you forever. Because forgiveness is not a prize you collect after confession. You let a lie grow into my exile. You became an adult. You graduated today. You had 13 years of language. Phones. Emails. Letters. And courage available to you. You used none of them." Emily folded in on herself. But she stayed standing. "That was something. Though not enough." "I know," she whispered. "No," I said. "You are beginning to know." Behind her, my mother appeared at the end of the hall with my father. Frank looked smaller from this distance. Not humble. Just stripped of the room he used to command. Linda clutched a damp tissue. They watched Emily confess in public. And for once, neither of them could turn her tears into a shield. "Nora," my mother called weakly. I did not look away from Emily. "Tell them," I said. Emily's eyes widened. "What if you came here to confess?" "Confess where the lie began living." She turned slowly toward our parents. Her voice shook. "I lied. Nora didn't steal the money. She wasn't sick. I made it up because I was scared." My father's face tightened with rage and humiliation. "Emily." Enough. That old command again. But Emily did not stop. "No. Dad, you threw her out because of me. And then you and Mom lied to the social worker. People in the hallway turned fully now. No pretending. No polite blindness. My mother began sobbing. My father looked around and realized too late that the room was no longer his. I looked at him and said, "There. 13 years late. But now you heard it from the daughter you kept." Then I turned back into the reception room, where Grace waited beside the open door, and left my family standing in the hallway with the truth finally belonging to more than just me. I left the reception through a side corridor with Grace on my right and Marisol a few steps ahead of us, clearing the path with the quiet authority of someone who understood that safety does not always look dramatic. Behind us, the hallway still carried voices, my mother crying, Emily trying to speak, my father saying my name like repetition could rebuild ownership. I did not turn around. 13 years earlier, I had turned back toward a locked door and waited for someone to choose me. I had learned better. Outside, the afternoon air was warm and bright. Families stood under oak trees taking photographs with graduates who had not yet removed their caps. A father lifted his daughter off the ground while her mother laughed. A little boy ran in circles around a woman holding flowers. For a second, the normal beauty of it almost hurt worse than the confrontation. Grace noticed. She always noticed. "Breathe," she said. I did. Marisol walked us to the speaker parking area, where a black university car waited. Before I reached it, my father's voice struck again from behind. "Nora, stop walking away from your family." I stopped. Not because he commanded me, because the sentence deserved to be buried properly. I turned. Frank Whitaker stood several yards away, blocked by a campus security officer who had one hand lifted in warning. Linda stood behind him, shaking. Emily was not with them now. Maybe she had finally found a corner where the truth could finish breaking her open. "Family," I said. My father's face twisted. "I made a mistake." "No. You made a decision." I was angry. So was the hurricane. It still did less damage than you. Grace's mouth tightened, but she said nothing. My father looked around, aware of students and parents nearby slowing down to watch. That awareness enraged him more than my words. Men like my father hate witnesses because witnesses turn authority into behavior. "You think humiliating us makes you better?" he asked. "No," I said. "Surviving you did that?" My mother stepped forward, crying harder. "Nora, I wanted to come to the hospital." I looked at her. "Then you should have come. Your father said, he said my name that night too. And you stopped moving." She folded around the words. I did not soften them. You do not get to hide behind his voice after using your own to confirm his lie. She covered her mouth. I was afraid. So was I? But I was 15. You were my mother. The security officer glanced at me. "Dr. Val, do you want them removed?" My father flinched at the word removed. "Good. Let him feel the shape of it in public." "Not yet," I said. I looked back at him. "You heard Emily." His jaw clenched. "She was a child. So was I. You were difficult." I smiled then. Cold enough that even he stopped. There it is. 13 years. A public confession. A hospital record. A foundation built from the wreckage. And you still need me to be difficult so you can survive what you did. His face went red. I was trying to protect the family. From what a daughter asking one more question, he had no answer. Only anger looking for a louder room. I turned to Linda. "And you? What were you protecting when you watched through the window?" she whispered. "I thought he would calm down and bring you back. The hospital called." She closed her eyes. "I know. Child services called." "I know. Grace showed up. Strangers showed up. Paperwork showed up. You did not. Each sentence landed where tears could not wash it away. My father tried to step around the security officer. Enough. The officer moved in front of him. Sit. Step back. For one beautiful second. The world turned cleanly upside down. The man who had once thrown me out was being told to stay away from the daughter he had discarded. I looked at Marisol. Now. She nodded to security. Please escort them away from the speaker exit. My mother sobbed. Nora. Please. My father barked. You can't do this. I looked at him one final time. You taught me how. Then I got into the car beside Grace. Through the window, I watched campus security guide them away from the curb, while parents, graduates, and faculty pretended not to stare and failed beautifully. My father's shoulders were stiff with public disgrace. My mother held her tissue to her face. Neither of them looked powerful anymore. They looked like people finally standing outside a door they could not unlock. As the car pulled away, Grace reached across the seat and took my hand. Are you all right? She asked. I watched the auditorium shrink behind us. No, I said honestly. But I'm free. That evening, back in my hotel room, I removed the graduation program from my bag. My name was printed on the front page under Keynote speaker. Emily's name appeared later under student honorees. I placed the program beside the old blue notebook I still carried on important days. The first page of that notebook held the handwriting of a 15-year-old girl trying to prove she had not deserved the storm. The program held the name of a woman who no longer needed to prove it. I wrote one line beneath both. They wanted me outside. Today, they were escorted away from my door. Then I closed the notebook and slept without waiting for anyone to knock. The next morning, the university issued a statement before my family had time to turn their embarrassment into a different story. Marisol sent it to me while Grace and I were having breakfast in the hotel cafe. It was brief, professional, and sharper than a page of gossip because it did not over-explain. The university confirms that Dr. Nora Vale was an invited keynote speaker at yesterday's commencement ceremony. Following the event, campus staff assisted in maintaining speaker privacy and safety. We ask all attendees to respect boundaries around invited guests and graduates. No names, no scandal. Just enough structure to tell the public that whatever happened after my speech had not been chaos. It had been containment. Grace read it over my shoulder and said, "They handled that well. They handled it better than my parents handled a hurricane." She looked at me over her coffee. That was almost a joke. Almost. My phone had been filling since sunrise. Messages from graduates. Notes from faculty. A reporter asking for comment. 3 unknown numbers with my old area code. I did not answer those. At noa dois prezece. An email arrived through the Storm Door Foundation contact page. Subject: Please read your mother. I almost deleted it. Then I saw the sender, Emily. Grace watched my face change. You don't have to open it. I know. That sentence has become important to you. Because it is true, I opened the email. Emily's message was long, but not decorative. She wrote that after security escorted our parents away, Dad had yelled in the parking lot until a campus officer warned him to leave. Mom had cried in the car and kept saying, "I saw her outside. I saw her outside." Emily wrote that she had never heard Mom say it plainly before. Then came the part that mattered. I lied when I was 13. But I also let them lie for me after I understood what it cost you. I used being a child as a hiding place long after I stopped being one. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve contact unless you want it. I am writing because I should have written years ago. I sat very still. It was the closest thing to truth Emily had ever given me without being cornered by witnesses. That did not make it enough. It made it recordable. I forwarded it to Grace, then saved it in a folder labeled Whitaker No Contact. Grace noticed the name, No Contact, Yes. For all of them, yes. She nodded. Not approving or disapproving. Just witnessing. That afternoon, the foundation board held an emergency call, not because I had done anything wrong, but because public truth creates ripples, and organizations need clean edges. Our legal advisor, Amare, advised that if my family attempted to contact the foundation, staff should not engage. All messages would be archived. Any physical appearance at an event would be referred to security. Nora, she said gently, do you want us to block their emails? No. I said, archive them. I do not need to read them. But I want the record to exist. Grace gave me the smallest smile from the corner of the screen. She had taught me long ago that records are what remain when people try to repaint the weather. By evening, my father had sent 4 messages. I did not open them. My mother sent one through the foundation office. I read only the first line in the preview. I was weak. But I loved you. I closed the laptop. Weak love had left a child in a storm. I had no appetite for the rest of the sentence. Emily sent no second message. That restraint was the only respectful thing she could have done. 2 days later, I flew home with Grace. At the airport, I bought a new blue notebook, the same color as the one she had given me in the hospital 13 years earlier. Another one, she asked. The old one is for surviving them. I said, this one is for after. On the flight. I wrote the first page after graduation speech delivered. Frank and Linda publicly confronted. Emily confessed. Security removed parents from speaker exit. University protected boundary. Family messages archived. No contact. No return. Then I paused, pen hovering over the paper, and added one more sentence. I do not owe them access to the woman I became after they abandoned the girl I was. When we landed, I turned my phone back on. More messages appeared. I silenced every unknown number from my old area code. Then I walked through the terminal beside Grace. Past families waiting with flowers and drivers holding signs, and felt no pull toward the people who had once taught me that home could become a locked door. My father had wanted me outside. My mother had watched me stay there. My sister had given them the lie that made it possible. 13 years later, they had all stood beneath bright lights, while the truth found them. That was enough. Forgiveness was not coming. A reunion was not waiting. The storm had passed, and I was not walking back into the house that chose it over me. For the next several weeks, the Whitakers tried to reach me in every way people use when they are still confusing regret with permission. My father sent emails through the foundation office with subject lines that changed from, "We need to talk to you, owe us one conversation," to "Your mother is not well." That last one almost made me laugh. Even 13 years later, he was still reaching for illness when he wanted control. Amara archived every message without replying. My mother sent handwritten letters to the foundation, each one addressed to Nora Whitaker, as if using the name she had helped bury could reopen a door. Grace asked once if I wanted to read them. I said no. Not even one, she asked. Especially not one. Emily sent nothing after her first email. That silence did not earn forgiveness. But it did prove she had understood one boundary better than our parents had. Then, at the end of the month, the university contacted me again. Not for a speech, for a complaint. My father had written to the dean, accusing the school of allowing me to publicly defame a private family. He claimed I had exaggerated a childhood dispute for attention, that my foundation was profiting from emotional manipulation, and that campus security had humiliated elderly parents without cause. The dean forwarded the letter to Amara and added only, "We stand by our invited speaker," and our staff's response. I stared at that sentence for a long time. 13 years earlier, adults with folders had believed my parents over me until Grace helped build a record. Now an institution had received my father's version and refused to bend around it. That felt like a door closing, but this time it closed on the right side. Amara asked if I wanted to issue a public statement. I said no at first. Then my father made the choice for me. 2 days later, he posted online, "Allons." Wounded paragraph about family pain, ungrateful children, and being shamed by someone we tried to help. He did not name me directly, but he did not have to. People who had attended graduation recognized enough. So did people from our old town. By morning, comments had gathered beneath his post like stormwater. Some supported him. More asked questions. One person wrote, "If she was lying, why did Emily confess in front of witnesses?" Another wrote, "Why didn't you go to the hospital?" My father deleted those first. That was his mistake. Screenshots travel faster than shame. Amara called an emergency meeting. "We can remain silent," she said, "or we can issue a boundary statement that does not name them but protects the foundation." I listened, then opened the new blue notebook. On the first page after the flight entry, I wrote one sentence before saying it aloud: "Do not defend the wound. Defend the work." That became our statement. The Storm Door Foundation posted it that afternoon. Our founder's work supports youth abandoned during crisis, including natural disasters and family emergencies. We do not litigate survivors' private histories online. We do, however, believe that young people deserve safety before reputation management. We ask that no one contact our staff seeking personal access to Dr. Val. All such messages will be archived and unanswered. It was not revenge. It was a locked gate with letterhead. My father took it as war because men like him think every boundary is an attack. My mother did something worse. She appeared at one of our regional partner offices 3 days later. Carrying a folder of old family photos, she told the receptionist she was my mother and had a right to leave something for me. The receptionist, trained by Amara's memo, called security and then the office director. No scene. No yelling. Just procedure. Linda Whitaker was asked to leave the building. When Amara told me, I felt nothing at first. Then I felt the old porch light flicker somewhere in my chest. "Did she leave?" I asked. "Yes." "Did staff feel threatened?" "No." "Shocking. But safe." "Good." Grace sat beside me during the call. Afterward, she said, "How does it feel?" I thought about my mother standing in a lobby with photographs, asking strangers to carry what she had refused to carry herself. "Late," I said. "It feels late." That night, Emily sent one final email, not asking for contact, not defending our parents. Just 3 lines: "Dad is making it worse. Mom thinks photos can prove love. I know they can't. I will not contact you again unless you invite it. I am sorry I waited until a room full of people made silence impossible." I saved it in the folder and did not reply. The next morning, I instructed Amara to send a formal no-contact notice to Frank and Linda Whitaker through counsel. It was simple. Do not contact me personally. Do not appear at my workplace or partner offices. Do not use the foundation to reach me. Do not contact Grace. And do not attempt public claims implying a relationship I had not consented to restore. When Amara asked if Emily should be included, I looked at her last email again. "No," I said. "She has stopped knocking. Let that be the only respectful thing she keeps." I wrote in the blue notebook, "Father complained." University stood firm. Public post contained. Foundation statement issued. Mother appeared at partner office and was removed. Formal no-contact notice sent to Frank and Linda. Emily silent by choice. Then I closed the book. My parents had once used a hurricane to make me disappear. Now every attempt they made to drag me back only created another record of why I would never return. The final punishment did not arrive with shouting. It arrived as silence around Frank and Linda Whitaker. At first, I heard about it only because Amara monitored anything that touched the foundation. My father's online post had not disappeared cleanly. Screenshots had traveled through our old town, through parents who remembered me from school, through neighbors who had once accepted the version where Nora was unstable and the Whitakers had done their best. The questions started politely, which made them more dangerous. Why didn't you go to the hospital? Why did Emily confess if Nora lied? Why would campus security remove you if you were only asking to speak privately? My father answered none of them well. Men like Frank Whitaker can survive being feared. They do not survive being doubted. My mother tried a softer route. She mailed another envelope to the foundation office, this time through certified delivery. Amara returned it through council, unopened. The receipt went into our records. When Linda sent old photographs again, Amara sent a second notice. Family memorabilia would not be accepted, stored, or forwarded. Photos are not consent, Amara said during our call. Exactly, I answered. Grace sat across from me in my office, reading the draft proposal for our new emergency scholarship fund. The graduation speech had brought donations from people who understood storms in more than one language. Some had survived hurricanes. Some had survived locked doors. Some had survived parents who chose reputation over rescue. We decided the money would support teenagers displaced during natural disasters when family abandonment made the crisis worse. Housing vouchers, emergency phones, legal document replacement, counseling referrals, tuition grants, practical things. Things I had needed at 15, while adults argued about whether I was believable. What are you calling it? Grace asked. I looked at the top of the proposal, where the blank line waited for a name. For years, Hurricane Iris had lived in my memory as the night everything ended. But that was not true. It was the night Frank and Linda ended. It was also the night Grace began. The Iris Fund, I said. Grace looked up. You're naming it after the storm. No, I said. I'm naming it after the night that failed to end me. Her eyes filled. But she smiled. That sounds like you. The announcement went out the following week. The Storm Door Foundation launches the Iris Fund to assist youth abandoned during natural disaster and family crisis. The press release did not mention my parents. It did not need to. That was the part they would never understand. My life's work was not built to chase them. It was built because they had taught me what abandonment costs. And Grace had taught me what intervention can save. A local paper from my old town picked up the announcement. The article included a short line from my commencement speech. The people who abandoned you do not get the final vote on your worth. By sunset, someone had taped a printed copy of the article to the bulletin board outside the church. My parents still attended. I did not ask who. I did not need to. Truth has volunteers. 2 days later, Emily sent one message through Amara. Not to me directly. Not asking for forgiveness. Just a note for the record. I saw the Iris Fund announcement. I am glad something good exists because someone finally helped you. I will not contact Nora unless she invites it. Amara asked if I wanted to respond. No. Do you want it archived? Yes. My father sent nothing that week. My mother sent nothing either. Their silence felt different now. Not peaceful. Defeated. The kind of silence that arrives when people finally understand that every attempt to explain themselves only gives the record another page. Grace and I attended the first Iris Fund board meeting at the end of the month. On the wall behind us was a photograph of a storm shelter. Not a house. I chose it deliberately. Houses can betray you. Shelter is something different. After the vote passed unanimously, everyone clapped. Grace squeezed my hand under the table. 15-year-old, you would be proud, she whispered. I thought of that girl in wet shoes. clutching a backpack under a porch light, waiting for a mother who did not open the door. 15-year-old me would be tired. I said, but yes, proud too. That night, I opened the new blue notebook and wrote Frank publicly questioned. Linda's letters returned unopened. No contact maintained. Iris Fund approved. Emily archived without reply. No visit. No reunion. The storm did not get the last word. Then I closed the notebook and placed it beside the old one. One held the girl who had been thrown away. One held the woman who no longer looked back to see if they regretted it. My parents had wanted me outside. Now they were outside the life I built, knocking at doors that answered only to policy, counsel, and silence. And for the first time, I did not feel the need to prove they deserved to stay there. They had proved it for me. The first Iris Fund recipient was 17. Quiet, and too careful with her backpack. Her name was Maya. And she arrived at our partner office with a school counselor, 2 plastic bags of clothes, and a folder of papers that had already been rained on once. When Amara sent me the case summary, she warned me that the details might feel close. A storm evacuation, a family argument, a teenager left behind because an adult decided anger was more important than safety. I read the file alone in my office, then closed it and looked at the wall until the room became steady again. Grace knocked once and came in with tea. You don't have to meet her personally, she said. I know. The fund can work without you becoming every girl you save. I know that too. She sat across from me, but I looked down at Maya's application. But someone met me. Grace said nothing. She did not need to. 2 days later, I met Maya in a small conference room with a social worker present. I did not tell her my whole story. Children in crisis do not need adults using their pain as a mirror. I only told her, you are safe here. And we believe you enough to start helping before everything is perfect on paper. Her eyes filled. But she did not cry. I recognize that kind of restraint. It is what children learn when tears have not been useful. Through the Iris Fund, Maya received temporary housing, a replacement ID, prepaid phone service, legal support, and a school transportation voucher. Practical help. Boring help. The kind that saves a life without needing applause. That evening, I wrote her initials in the confidential grant log and sat for a long time with my pen still in my hand. Frank and Linda had tried to make my past a shameful family secret. Instead, their worst night had become a system that opened doors for other people's children. That was the part of my revenge they could never touch. Not humiliation. Not the graduation speech. Not even the no-contact notice. The real punishment was that the daughter they threw away had become useful to strangers in a way she would never again be available to them. A week later, Amara brought me another update. My father had tried to contact a former board member of the foundation, someone he found online, claiming he wanted to correct false impressions. The former board member forwarded the message without responding. Frank had written, Nora has built a career on one bad night. I read the line once. He still thinks the night is the whole story. I said, Grace, standing near the window, shook her head. No. He hopes it is. She was right. If it was one bad night, then perhaps he could ask for one apology. One conversation. One chance to explain. But it was not one night. It was the hospital. The lie to the social worker. The birthdays missed. The graduation seats left empty. The 13 years of silence. The public post. The complaint to the university. The attempt to walk into my work through the side door. One bad night had become a life pattern. That was why no contact stayed in place. That Friday, I was invited to speak at a small donor luncheon for the Iris Fund. Grace sat at the front table, Amara stood near the back with her phone ready in case anyone from the Whitaker family tried another stunt. No one did. I stepped to the microphone and looked at the donors, advocates, counselors, and former recipients in the room. People often ask why our grants move quickly. I said, why we pay for safe rooms, transport, phones, and documents before every emotional detail has been processed. The answer is simple. Crisis does not wait for adults to become brave. Grace lowered her eyes, smiling faintly. When a young person says a door has closed behind them, we do not begin by asking whether they deserve the weather. We begin by asking where they will sleep tonight. The room was quiet. The good kind. The listening kind. Afterward, a woman approached me and said, "Your parents must be proud of what you turned it into." I looked at her for 1 second too long. Grace started to step forward, but I answered calmly, "The people who abandoned me do not receive credit for what I built after surviving them." The woman flushed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean I know." I said, "But it matters." And it did. It mattered because society loves turning survival into a family redemption story. It loves imagining parents crying in the back row, children forgiving them under soft lights. Everyone learning a lesson before the credits roll. But some families do not become safer because the survivor succeeds. Some parents only become sorry when the child they discarded becomes too visible to deny. That night, I opened the blue notebook and wrote First Iris Fund recipient supported. Frank attempted indirect contact. Message archived. Donor luncheon completed. No family credit. No contact maintained. Then I added one more line. My life is not their redemption arc. I underlined it once. Not because I feared forgetting. Because the world often tries to forget for you. 1 year after the graduation speech, the Storm Door Foundation held the first annual Iris Fund ceremony in a community center 3 miles from the hospital where I had woken up at 15. I chose the location deliberately. Not for drama. For geography. Some places deserve to see who made it out. The room was full by 6 o'clock counselors, teachers, donors, social workers, former recipients, and teenagers sitting with the guarded posture of young people who had learned too early that safety can be temporary. Grace sat in the front row, wearing the same navy suit she had worn at my keynote. Amara stood near the back, smiling at the check-in table like a lawyer, pretending not to watch every door. No Whitakers were on the guest list. That mattered. I had not softened the no-contact notice. I had not answered my father's messages. I had not read my mother's returned letters. Emily had kept her promise and stayed silent. Silence, from her, had become the only apology I could accept. Before the ceremony began, Grace came to my side and adjusted the collar of my jacket the way she had before my high school graduation. "You ready?" she asked. "No." She smiled. "Good. Ready is overrated." On stage, behind the podium, the screen displayed the Iris Fund logo, a small open doorway with rain outside and light inside. I looked at it for a long moment. At 15, I had stood on the wrong side of a door. At 28, I had stood on a graduation stage they could not lock me out of. Now, at 29, I stood in front of a room built not from revenge, but from refusal. Refusal to let abandonment become the final language of my life. When I stepped to the microphone, the room settled. A year ago, I began. I spoke at a graduation and told the truth about a girl who was thrown out during a hurricane because her family preferred a lie to one more question. Many people called that speech brave. Some called it harsh. A few called it unforgiving. I paused. They were right about the last part. The room went very still. I did not apologize for that. I did not forgive the people who left me outside. I did not go home. I did not reopen contact. I did not turn survival into a reunion because some wounds look prettier when other people can imagine them healed. Grace's eyes shone. But she was smiling. She knew exactly why I had to say it. Forgiveness can be beautiful. I continued. But so can distance. So can a blocked number. So can a legal boundary. So can a life where the person who harmed you no longer has a key. A chair. Or a vote. A few people began clapping before they realized I was not finished. I let them. Then I looked toward the teenagers, seated near the front. Maya was there. Shoulders straighter than the first day I met her. Her backpack still close but no longer clutched like a life raft. The Iris Fund exists because a storm did not end me. And neither did the people who locked the door. It exists for young people who need shelter before a committee decides whether their pain is polite enough. It exists because crisis does not wait for adults to become brave. This time, the applause came hard and fast. I waited for it to settle. Then we awarded the first full-year Iris grants. Housing support, tuition assistance, emergency phones, transportation funds, legal document replacement. Things that sounded small until you had once needed all of them with wet shoes and nowhere to sleep. After the ceremony, a donor approached me and asked carefully, "Do you ever think your family will understand what they lost?" I looked across the room at Grace, who was laughing with Maya near the refreshment table. "They understand enough to be ashamed." I said, "That is not the same as being welcome." Later that evening, Amara told me my father had sent one final message through an old foundation contact. The subject line was, "Your mother is sick with regret." I did not open it. "Archive it." I said, "No response, no response. And if they keep trying, then we keep the boundary." She nodded. "Good." Grace drove me back to the hotel after the event. The city lights blurred softly through the windshield. We passed the hospital, and for the first time, I did not feel 15. I felt the age I was, the woman I had become. At the hotel, I opened the old blue notebook and the new one side by side. In the old one, a girl had written, "My mom saw me." In the new one, I wrote, "First Iris ceremony completed. Grants awarded. No forgiveness. No return. No contact. Distance honored. The door stayed closed by my choice." I set the pen down and sat quietly. My parents had called me sick because the truth was too heavy for them to diagnose. My sister had lied because fear was easier than courage. My mother had watched through a window. My father had locked the door. 13 years later, they were exposed in a room full of witnesses. 1 year after that, their shame had become policy. Procedure. Scholarships. Housing. Phone cards. And safe beds for children they would never meet. That was the answer my life gave them. Not forgiveness. Not reunion. Not a tearful return to the porch where I almost died. They wanted a daughter they could explain. They got a woman they could not reach. Some doors should never be reopened, especially the ones you almost died outside of. So if your family threw you away when you needed them most, would you forgive them? Or would you let silence be the last door you closed? Emergency workers know that a shelter is not built by good intentions alone. It needs lights that stay on when the power fails. Doors that open from the inside. A list of names checked twice. And someone assigned to notice who has not arrived yet. That was the lesson Hurricane Iris left me. A family can call itself a home, but if it has no procedure for protecting the child who is inconvenient, then it is only a building with warm rooms and dangerous rules. I built the Iris Fund like an emergency plan I should have had at 15. Not dramatic. Not sentimental. But practical safe beds. Working phones. Replacement documents. Transportation. Legal help. And adults trained to ask the question my parents never asked, "Where will this child sleep tonight?" The point was never to prove that I had suffered more than anyone else. The point was to make sure suffering did not have to wait politely outside while adults protected their reputations. A locked door had once ended my childhood. A well-kept checklist would help another child keep theirs. Be Asinadas. Scriptwriter Nguyen Van Chien.